Welcome to the Kent Lap Podcast.
Lulu, you said you mentioned you feel that pressure.
Mm-hmm.
How do you handle that?
I think similarly to Travis, it's not something that I think about. And I know for me, it's just, I also have a personality that's a little bit of a perfectionist. And I think, so I don't know how to detach that from, again, what this greater pressure is. And then same thing with my family. Our kind of worldview is a little bit more communal than it is individualistic. And so that means that you need to get your stuff together because you don't want to make the family look bad, or you don't want to make what you do impacts other people. And so in that sense, there's a pressure that's from there, that's outside. And then the race is an external layer on top of that. And so when I think about that, I think that's just the way that I've always operated. And so in that sense, there's at one point, I think, an encountering of like, oh, okay, this is what, this is what the world expects of me. Am I just going to keep being this? Am I going to buck against it? Because I can sometimes have a little bit of a random rebellious streak sometimes. I'm kind of exactly what you're saying. I'm like, wait,
okay.
what?
Yeah, you
no,
understand.
I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
Exactly. But at the end of the day, I'm just kind of like, okay, I am who I am, who has been someone, after always not fitting in these places, I've grown to be a person who is pretty comfortable being uncomfortable, or maybe not being the only, or being the one who doesn't fit in. Like that's become possibly my shtick. And so in that, it gives me freedom to be who I am, to be someone who is Black and who has natural hair and who likes video games and jujitsu and like anime and like all this stuff that people are like, wait, but how we wouldn't have put you. I'm like, yes, I do that. I do that. And I do it all. And that's who I am. And I'm going to leave you to try and figure out how all that fits together, because I'm busy existing, being all of whatever that weird possible in someone else's eyes combination is.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, I know, again, still early on, middle school at once, I was on like a school team to like show people around the school, like give tours when other people were thinking, mainly parents thinking about bringing their kids there. And I remember at the end of one of the tours, one of the women, she's like, oh my gosh, you were so articulate, and not so much in a way that was like, for a kid, but just for like, it was just a weird thing. She was just like really.
She didn't expect it.
Exactly. She was just kind of like, whoa. And it really was, I think, in parentheses after that, like for a Black person. And things like that have come up all the time consistently, because kind of just getting to your point about sometimes people thinking like, okay, well, do you, or sometimes if there's conversations that come up, then people are like, well, you're not that kind of Black person, or you're more like us, you're more white, and it might be because of the way I talk, or because of, I don't know, what other category I tend to fall into that people are like, oh, that's like me too. And I think what I've come to do is, rather than associate anything with Black or white or Asian or Hispanic or whatever, it's just kind of like, as a person, this is like an affinity that I have, and you have that affinity too. And it's not yours and it's not mine.
Yeah.
It's this thing that we can enjoy, and it's not bounded by race or culture, thankfully enough, because this world is so interconnected now.
Yeah.
We can just appreciate those things and not be so obsessed about putting labels or boxes around those things. But I think in the same sense, on the other side, there still needs to be an understanding and appreciation of like, okay, if I'm loving Korean dramas, that comes from Korea. Like, I need to make sure that like I can appreciate that that's an aspect of Korean culture that I can celebrate, rather than, so we don't cross into lines of appropriation and like all these and disrespectful kind of things. I think there's a way to acknowledge culture and race to an extent that comes as a result of, the culture that emerges from race without it being restrictive. And so I think for me, when it comes to this idea of like how to deal with that pressure, I think God is working on me and my perfectionism in the ways that goes bad in and of itself. But I think, at least again, in that aspect of do whatever you do until the glory of the Lord, like that's something that I can embrace, and whatever comes along with that, appreciating the different influences that pour into me in that kind of way that God's given me exposure to.